Welcome to the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center's quarterly program, Learning in a Virtual Environment, live. Highlighting relevant topics in 21st CCLC out-of-school time programming, special guests from the field, upcoming technical assistance, and website features. Let's get started with today's 21st CCLC NTAC Live. Here are your hosts, Brittany and Chaz.
Welcome to our Learning in a Virtual Environment. Our session today is Beyond the Grant, Building Sustainable 21st CCLC Programs, where you'll have the opportunity to hear from experts and program leaders about how they've successfully supported 21st CCLC programs. My name is Chaz Sumners, and I'm a TA liaison with the U.S. Department of Education's National Technical Assistance Center team. Today, I'm joined by Brittany Stanton, TA liaison.
Welcome, everyone, on behalf of the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center, or NTAC. The NTAC team is a partnership between the U.S. Department of Education, Synergy Enterprises, Inc., Foundations, Inc., and APT Global. The 21st CCLC NTAC is here to support program leaders and professionals as you obtain the knowledge and skills to implement programs that engage and empower students and their families to build lasting success as lifelong learners. The 21st CCLC NTAC provides best practices, evidence-based resources, and professional learning opportunities to build the capacity of 21st CCLC stakeholders to support underserved youth and their families. Here to share a little bit more about how today's live is directly linked to your needs in the field is Dr. Candace Ferguson, Project Director for the 21st CCLC NTAC.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are joining us from. And welcome to today's live event. I'm so excited to hear from all of our panelists today to share their insight with you on this important topic. But before I turn it back over to our host, I just wanted to take a quick minute to let you all know that the topic of sustainability, we all know, is very much needed. And we know this at the NTAC because you all have continued to tell us. In fact, we've been collecting data from you all over the last year. And most recently, we heard from our 21st CCLC state coordinators and our subgrantees at the summer symposium that was held in San Francisco. And this topic just always rises to the top, and we know it's for good reason. So I just wanted to welcome you and let you know that, we're at the NTAC, we're always trying to intentionally design and deliver learning experiences for each of you that are based on your needs. So this is just the first of several different learning experiences that we'll have on the topic of sustainability. So stay tuned. And again, thank you so much for being here, and thanks to all of our panelists for your contributions. Brittany and Chad, I'm going to kick it back over to you all.
Thank you so much, Candace. And thanks to our panelists and audience for joining us today. Chaz, do you want to introduce our guests for today?
Absolutely. So joining us today are professionals who are implementing best practices around sustainability and creating opportunities for future groups of students to participate in 21st CCLC programs, as well as subject matter experts to share with us strategies around sustainability. They are Stacy Stratman, Executive Director at Covington Partners. Can you tell us a little bit about your programs and their context, Stacy?
Sure. Let me come on camera real quick. I would love to. So Covington Partners, we started in Covington, Kentucky, but now, hence the name Covington, but now we are actually branching out across the Northern Kentucky region. Our main programming that has caused us to grow to other school districts is our out-of-school time programming, before, after, and summer program. We have a very robust program that aligns to the school day. All of our programs are actually happening at school sites. And so we have a strong academic program that aligns it to the school day, and then a very robust summer program that's actually reversed the summer slide in reading and math. We see summer growth, particularly for students who come 10 times or more. And so we also provide a mentoring program for students 3rd through 12th grade throughout our school districts that we partner with, and family engagement. So that we feel like those 3 big components, out of school time programming, mentoring, and family engagement, when you align that to what's happening in schools and become really strong partners in the school with the school districts, students and families succeed. And we see that happening here in Northern Kentucky, and are pretty proud of the work that we're able to accomplish here.
Deservedly so. Thank you so much for sharing. Up next, we have Tony Strait. He's a principal investigator at the National Center for After School and Summer Enrichment, or NCASE. Tony, can you tell us a little bit about your work at NCASE?
Sure, happy to. You might recognize that NCASE sounds a little like NTAC, and that's because we are a sister technical assistance center. We're the National Center on After School and Summer Enrichment. We've been around for 9 years, though. We were launched in 2016, and we are a center of the Office of Child Care at the Administration for Children and Family in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So, like Department of Ed, they felt it was necessary to have a center that supported their work in this out-of-school time space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but there is a significant amount of funding that comes out of ACF that goes out to support childcare, and school-age children are part of that population. So I'll talk about that support and how it might be an opportunity for programs like those on the call today.
Awesome. Can't wait. And last but never least, we have Nola Derby-Bennett. She's the Director of Community Learning Centers for Lincoln Public Schools. Nola, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, so here in Lincoln Public Schools, we serve 29 buildings, K through 12. It's about half of our school district. We serve about 12,000 students a year in before and after school programming and summer. And we have kind of a lead agency model here in Lincoln. And so we partner with 10 nonprofits to help us to deliver our out of school time programming during the school year and the summer. And so that's kind of been a model that's really worked for us here in Lincoln. And our entire community has embraced the community schools model, and we are a community schools district. That is part of our district's personality.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear more from each of you. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we'll discuss them later with our panelists. But for right now, Brittany, let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So sustainability has become something of a buzzword lately, and for good reason. People all over are replacing everyday household disposables with items like reusable straws and plastic-free soap. These small decisions are sure to make a lasting impact on Mother Earth, and future generations will benefit. Did you know that this same idea can apply to your program? It can be helpful to think of grant money as a seed that you and your team must plant, water, and nurture so that the seed sprouts and grows into a flourishing program. From the fruits of your labor, pun intended, students and families get resources that help them thrive and move toward their goals. However, just like Mother Nature, the wide world of funding can sometimes be unpredictable. So it's important that your program has strong roots to sustain itself, even if the status of your 21st CCLC grant changes. That's why our programs are required to design and implement a sustainability plan and maintain it as a living document. Your sustainability plan is a required aspect of your 21st CCLC grant application. You'll see the statute that references the sustainability plan on the screen here. If you need more help understanding the sustainability plan requirements, you can refer to the sustainability job aid that is coming soon on the NTAC website. After the grant is awarded, it's important to regularly review and update the plan to reflect changing needs and opportunities. Once you receive your local evaluation report, you can use it to modify your existing sustainability plan. This will help you in measuring outcomes to determine which investments to sustain. We'll talk more about what we mean by investments in a little bit, but let's start with what you can expect to see in a sustainability plan. While it is possible for many different elements to be included in your plan, make sure you are focusing on these key areas. Be clear about what sustainability looks like for your program and what should be sustained. An excellent way to do this is through monitoring and evaluation that focuses on collecting data regarding sustainability indicators. Once you have this data, it becomes much easier to target state programs and community partners that can assist you with sustaining aspects of your program.
The Strategic Planning for Continued Recovery, or SPCR initiative, is an initiative that aims to support state education agencies as they work with local education agencies to sustain effective investments, particularly of ESSER funds. Today, we'll talk about various aspects of the SPCR as adapted for today's conversation. We'll focus on strategies that can be applied to 21st CCLC leaders at the state or program level to support sustainability. Let's take a look at them, Brittany.
Sure, Chaz. The first step in sustainability planning is to determine the impact of the investments that have been made. So in this step, it is important to gather both quantitative and qualitative data regarding the impact and implementation of 21st CCLC funding, and to use this information in making decisions regarding programmatic and fiscal sustainability. It is important to ask questions to help determine the impact of financial investment in 21st CCLC programs. Questions like, what need does this activity address? What is the theory of action or logic model? And what data is being tracked to determine if the activity met the expected outcome? You can use your local evaluation report to help take a closer look at the data that you have. Using logic models and a theory of action can be powerful tools to support the sustainability of a program. A logic model provides a clear visual representation of the program's inputs, activities, outputs, and intended outcomes. By mapping out these elements, the logic model helps program leaders and stakeholders understand how resources are used to achieve specific goals, ensuring alignment with the program's mission. It also serves as a framework for ongoing evaluation, making it easier to track progress and demonstrate the program's impact to funders and partners. A theory of action complements the logic model by outlining the underlying assumptions and beliefs that drive the program's strategy. It explains why the program's approach is expected to lead to the desired outcomes and how each component contributes to long-term success. By articulating a clear theory of action, programs can build stronger buy-in from stakeholders, guiding decision-making and ensure that efforts remain focused on sustainability. Together, logic models and a theory of action create a solid foundation for strategic planning, continuous improvement, and long-term viability.
When we monitor and understand student outcomes, this prepares us for step 2, communicate the impact of investments. As you plan for sustainability, think through how you'll use data to communicate the impact of these investments. Interest holders are anyone who could at some point play a role at sustaining your 21st CCLC program, either now or in the future. When you're communicating with these interest holders, it's important to share information to help them understand the factors influencing implementation and outcomes of investment, as well as what might be needed to make improvements to the activities. So various groups of interest holders will need various types of information. For example, if you're a community-based organization, it's going to be important for your partnering LEA to understand the impact of your program. With this information, they can become powerful advocates for the work that you do. Questions to ask yourself as you consider what to communicate could include, What aspects of what we do align with their goals? What motivates their engagement?
And so we move to step 3. Step 3 is prioritizing efforts. We know that what you do is important, so this step can be the hardest. How you will look at the cost, outcomes, and potential sustainability of each activity you provide to identify your top priority activities to sustain. To do this, you will first look at data to evaluate what's working. Second, you'll determine the cost of an activity and the likelihood that it can be sustained. And third, you'll engage in decision-making and communication around what you'll sustain. Step 4 is to achieve sustainability through financial planning. With your prioritized activities, you will need to take a look closely at your budget to assure that funds those activities. Then you will and can work to identify additional funding sources. These could be federal, state, local, or private funds.
That's right. But that's not all, Brittany. We've also need to remain focused on students who have been historically marginalized and who have the greatest needs. We should be asking questions such as, how are we working to reduce disparities in opportunities to learn? How are we reducing achievement gaps? Are we serving diverse groups of students? Ensuring access and opportunity for all requires an ongoing commitment to everyone having access to programs, quality teachers, technology, and more. Sustainability planning is an ongoing process. It's integrated into the entire program lifecycle. Just like activity planning, program scheduling, outcome assessment, sustainability efforts should be continuous and evolve over time. Both short and long-term actions are necessary to maintain program viability. Future sustainability efforts build on the foundational work you're doing now. Informed by strategic decision-making, you want to regularly revisit and reflect on your sustainability plan. You want to adjust it as needed based on that feedback and what's working, based on emerging challenges and changing priorities. Sustainability becomes part of the bigger picture woven into your program's ongoing success and operations that way. So we've invited Nola to talk to us more about creating sustainable programs and how to do it effectively. So Nola, can you tell us a little bit about your programs and the ways in which you're currently funding them?
Yeah, so like I said, we have before and after school programming here in Lincoln, and then we also do summer programming. And it's a really braided funding model. I know that's a term that lots of people are familiar with in terms of how to run big programs such as the 21st century programs that we all are running. We do use local funds. We have several local foundations that support us. We have state and federal funding. We also leverage our principals are provide funding from their Title I budgets to help support our programming. And then in 2018, our school district and our city came together and created an interlocal agreement where both entities contribute about $1 million to support community learning centers here in Lincoln, as well as school resource officers, behavioral health programming, and threat assessment in our school district. And so that interlocal agreement, which is, I think, a really unique partnership between our community and our school district, has then given us the opportunity to leverage additional funds from other foundations who recognize the true investment of our city and our school district into this work, and they want to get on board. They know that the strategy is working. They know that the impact that it's having on students and families and on the community in our city. And so we've been able to leverage those funds to add additional funders to our menu of funders. So, and then the other thing is, I mentioned that we we operate on a lead agency model, and so we have 10 nonprofit partners that help us to deliver this work. And that's really key in the structure of our programming, because those 10 partners also leverage their fundraising abilities to contribute funds to the overall strategy. So, they've got 10 board of directors who are prominent folks all across our communities who believe in this work and who are actively championing this work and bringing funds to the table. So it is a diverse and braided funding structure, and it's not always super easy to manage all of those partners, but it's worth it because the impact on our students and their families is measurable.
Awesome. Can you just tell us briefly, what does your sustainability plan look like, and what do you think one should include?
Yeah, so I mean, we're constantly talking about sustainability. I bring funders to the table because I don't think that I can build a strategic or a sustainability plan by myself. I need to know is the work that we're doing and is the mission that we're carrying out something that our funders are committed to now and into the future. So I bring a group of funders to the table, and we sit down and talk about our strategic goals as an organization, how they match together. And then, we talk about commitments. Our funders will go out on our behalf and talk with other donors in the community. We partner very closely with our community foundation. And so the president of our community foundation is our board chair of our nonprofit that supports our work. And is constantly out hustling to make sure that this work is carried forward. So we look at short-term sustainability, right? Like we map out what our school year is going to look like, and then we look at mid-range sustainability. We're looking at like 3 to 5 years, and then we look at long-term. So we're thinking about we're a school district of 72 buildings. And so we know that we are not, that the need is going to continue to grow. And so we need to know, how are we going to continue to meet that need here in our community? Because we can't just say, well, this is the money that we have, and sorry about the buildings that we don't serve. No, that's not the mindset here. The mindset is, we need to know where the funds are coming from so that we can continue to match the need as it continues to expand in our community.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like you touched on it just a little bit, but can you tell us what you prioritized in your sustainability planning and how your data informed it?
Yeah. So, we're constantly looking at our free reduced lunch numbers here in Lincoln. That is a huge indicator for us of where we go next. That is, complicated by the fact that we have a very significantly growing community. And our mayor in our community admirably has prioritized continuing to build affordable housing in our community, which is great. And the center of our city is landlocked, right? So the affordable housing gets built on the edges of our community, which is moving folks away from the resources that they've come to experience living in the schools and the neighborhoods that we currently serve. So as the continued growth and expansion of our city is happening, the discussions that we've been having with our community about, it's really great that housing developers are being incentivized to build and to incorporate affordable housing into those new developments, and we need a set aside of funding that can help us to continue to expand to meet people's needs as they are moving into home ownership and wonderful affordable housing opportunities, but not to take away the resources that they've come to expect and to rely on in order to meet the needs of their families. So that is a huge priority, and it is maybe not one of the data indicators that most people think of when they're putting together their sustainability plan, but has definitely allowed us to continue to keep up as our community is growing and as people are, achieving their dreams, but also still receiving the support that we're able to bring to them. So I would say that's one piece of data that we're following that maybe isn't necessarily, attendance data, graduation rates, of course, all of those, truancy rates, school referrals and suspensions, like all of those things are also pieces that we're looking at and making sure that we're offering the programming that we are offering, and that we're finding the funders that are interested in supporting those areas and helping us to, meet the needs of our students.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait to hear more about, how you're supporting the work that you do a little bit later. Thank you so much for sharing, Nola.
Yep.
So you should think about your plan in phases. Depending on your funding cycle, your phases might have different lengths. So for instance, if your grant is a 5-year grant, phase 1 would be years 1 and 2 of that grant, with focus on understanding the key elements to sustain and the data you need to capture to measure those outcomes. Understanding key elements of a program is essential for sustaining it over the long term. To ensure sustainability, program leaders need to clearly define the core components that drive the program's mission and impact. This includes identifying the program's primary objectives, target population, and critical activities that align with its vision. Additionally, understanding how these elements contribute to community needs and stakeholder expectations is crucial for maintaining relevance and support. But equally important is capturing the right data to measure outcomes effectively. So this data should include both quantitative and qualitative metrics that reflect the program's success in meeting its goals. For example, tracking participant enrollment and retention rates, academic progress, and social emotional development are vital indicators for impact. Collecting testimonials, participant feedbacks, and case studies also provide valuable qualitative insights. Now, by regularly gathering and analyzing this data, programs can demonstrate their effectiveness, make informed adjustments, and build a compelling case for continued funding and support.
And once you have a firm understanding of these two elements, your sustainability plan, you can use this data to inform your choices when then building relationships with community partners and leveraging federal programs. This is a critical starting place as it has the potential to enhance programming and build the long-term relationships needed for additional stages while reducing costs. So in phase 1, you should also focus on federal or state programs that support your program, such as USDA feeding programs, which many 21st CCLC programs are required to participate in. Through these programs, youth can receive nutritious meals. These programs are school lunch programs, summer food service programs, or the child and adult care food program. And after you've explored these federal and state programs, you'll want to establish partnerships with local organizations and education institutions to enhance resources and support. For some, there may be less options based on where you are, but consider your local library, 4-H, Girl or Boy Scouts, or other national organizations with local chapters, or virtual opportunities like Skype a Scientist that you can access from anywhere that you have internet. Who are some of your current community partners? Let us know in the chat who it is that you're working with.
So as you think about your partners, focus on opportunities that can be long-term. Additionally, you'll want to make sure that these partnerships align with your program design. For example, you may have someone who wants to do a 6-week robotics course at your arts program, which sounds awesome. This is cool, but it's short-term and it might not align with your program design. Once you identify aligned long-term opportunities, it's important to strengthen and maintain those partnerships. Now, you can do this by acknowledging the partner. You consider using your newsletter, social media, or events. You also should share your program impacts with the partner. Share the progress that students are making and your accomplishments. Now, you can do this by sharing your annual report or providing partner updates. So What ways do you strengthen and maintain your community partnerships? Please feel free to share out in the chat.
And now we're at phase 2, which could be years 2 and 3 of a 5-year grant. It's crucial to focus on securing sustainable funding for the elements of the program that you want to sustain based on your data. For example, staffing that may require you to engage corporate partners. Remember that your timeline might look different if your grant is a part of a 3 or a 4-year cycle. Begin by looking at your data, then assessing your current staffing needs and identifying any gaps. Consider leveraging workforce development programs, volunteer and internship opportunities to bring in enthusiastic individuals at a lower cost. So for example, you could partner with local colleges or universities where internships can provide valuable experiences for students while helping your program manage staffing costs effectively. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program and Seniors Foster Grandparent Program through AmeriCorps are other ways to identify tutors or activity leaders. There are also a variety of career-connected learning, volunteer, and employment programs that target young adults. Your local workforce development board or employment office can be a starting place to help you identify programs in your state, county, or community, in addition to national programs such as AmeriCorps. You can use these programs to reduce staffing costs while maintaining high-quality programming. It is also important during this stage to implement staff retention strategies. That could be professional development, benefits, and a supportive work environment to keep your team motivated and committed.
So key. You want to develop partnerships with local businesses. This is another really key strategy in this particular phase. But you want to be strategic in your ask to these partners. You may want to consider approaching businesses for sponsorships and in-kind donations that align with your more immediate program needs, but that also align with your overall sustainability goals. These partnerships, they can provide financial support and resources that help sustain your program. You can create sponsorship packages that highlight benefits for corporate partners, such as brand visibility and community engagement. This not only secures immediate support, but starts to build a network of advocates for your program. In stage 3, or years 4 or 5 of a 5-year grant, depending on the elements of your program that you want to sustain, the focus might shift to securing long-term funding through grant writing or replacing reduced funds with other subsidies. So you could start by identifying and applying for grants from foundations, government agencies, and private entities. Developing a comprehensive grant calendar can help you keep track of these application deadlines and specific requirements for each funding source, which can get a little tricky.
Yes, it's essential to have a strategic approach to grant writing. You want to apply for grants that align with your goals and student needs. Use your application to highlight your program's unique strengths and explain how your goals align with the funder's priorities. Demonstrate the impact of your program through data and success stories. Engaging a professional grant writer or providing training for staff who support the grant writing process can significantly improve the quality of your applications. But you can't use 21st century funds to pay for this. As you regularly review and update that sustainability plan to reflect changing needs and opportunities, secure new funding sources, maintain relationships with past funders by keeping them informed about your program's progress and impact. This ongoing communication can lead to renewed support and new funding opportunities. Today, we've invited Tony to talk to us more about the funding landscape for OST programs and the variety of options and strategies to approach sustainability. Tony, can you tell us just a little bit more about NCASE and the work that you do?
Well, sure. But I have to start by saying, like, I'm learning things just hearing all your guidance, and I can't help but think back. So I'm not trying to age myself, but I was an after school practitioner 30 some years ago. And everything you're talking about, all this, and this was before 21st century, by the way, all the ways to tap into community and to find collaborators. That's true at the community level, and then all the way up in terms of working at the federal level. And so in all the time that we've been managing NCASE, sustainability has been a real important issue because it's an issue for practitioners, and frankly, it's an issue for families. And I'll talk about families in a minute because I think they're a huge part of the equation. But I mentioned before that we're funded by the Office of Child Care at the Administration for Children and Family. And OCC is the agency that's responsible for administrating the Child Care Development Fund. So these are federal funds that were identified by legislation many years back that support working families so that they can have childcare. And thousands and thousands of families around the country tap into this. And most people, when they hear about childcare, they think of little kids, 0 to 5, toddlers, babies, which is what the program supports. But in fact, 45% of all the children who receive subsidy through CCDF are 5 to 12 years old. So they are school age young people. They spend part of their day in school, and for another part of the day, while their parents are working, they need a safe, enriching place to go. And that's what childcare provides. So our charge is always to look at how to build awareness within the CCDF community of how those children can be better served. Now, one distinction between CCDF and 21st Century is that those funds go from the federal government to state agencies and tribes and territories in a block grant fashion. So the states, for example, have agencies that administer that block grant and distribute subsidies to providers across their state. And those can be community-based centers, those can be family child care centers, they can even be care right in the home for children with special needs and other populations. But it isn't the grant style that 21st Century is. So it's a little more complicated in how the funds flow down. But one of the messages we try to bring is that they're all our children around the country, that all of our children need care in these hours. And in fact, CCDF supports summer, before care, school breaks, even overnight care for families that work, unusual hours. So it's really supporting those families in the ways that allow them to work and support themselves. Now, what you'll hear people say is, oh, but don't families have to pay fees to be a part of these programs? And that is the case in some settings, and that becomes an issue that people think is tricky with 21st Century because you're not supposed to receive fees with 21st Century. But the two things that we've shared, and I think Nola mentioned it, is this concept of grading funds, where you're looking at how certain funds are used for certain children and families, and other funds are used for other children and families. And so making that distinction and reporting clearly to funders who you're serving and how you're using their funds is the way to deal with that. Another important thing to know about is that this year, ACF released the new rule. This is the interpretation of the legislation that the administration puts out. And one of the features of that rule was actually encouraging states to consider waiving fees for families, particularly where there might be coordination with 21st Century. So there is kind of progress in trying to allow both states and then the providers they serve to better tap into a variety of federal funds.
Thank you so much, Tony. And the explanation about the Child Care Development Fund, CCDF, if you didn't catch it, check the chat. There's a link in there for you. We also dropped in the chat information about NCASE, as well as some other resources from NCASE around these kind of topics. But Tony, can you just highlight for us, what should 21st century program leaders be thinking about whenever they begin to explore these funding opportunities such as CCDF?
Well, and you hinted at some of these. The first is to not immediately just think about how am I going to pay for these kids, because there's a variety of needs that you have to support your programs and deliver them. And it doesn't just have to be about payment for individual kids. One of the great examples of how we've seen out in the field, people tapping into resources from both federal agencies is by coordinating professional development. Again, OST is a wide field. There's a lot of folks that work in it, and they need professional development. And there's no reason that PD can't be combining funds from, say, a CCDF agency and their state Department of Education. So seeing how to support other aspects than just the delivery of program. You also mentioned tapping into Department of Agriculture. That's so important. That there's so many opportunities to support pieces of the program that are essential, and feeding children is one of those essential pieces, especially if you're, the key nutritious meal that they're getting that particular day. So that's another area to definitely look into. And again, it is possible to braid funding. You just have to have the internal capacity and the financial tracking and the evaluation reporting so that you can really distinguish between the different communities that you serve, different families.
I think that's wise advice. Thank you so much, Tony. I want to ask you, is there any other resources available through NCASE that folks can tap into?
Yeah, well, so I can see that some of them have been added to the chat. All of these come out of our NCASE resource library. Ever since we launched NCASE, again, 9 years ago, we've been looking at resources and research on out of school time writ large and trying to parse out, like, what are the key things that both policymakers and practitioners need to know about. And so our library, which you can get to from the links, and I'll put a direct link in a second here, that has more than 600 resources culled over the years about topics like sustainability, but also workforce development and all aspects of OST. And they're vetted by our staff and leaders in the field, like from After School Alliance, like from National After School Association, that help you have those kind of go-to resources. So we always encourage people to use the library and even make recommendations for resources you might need. The other thing to share, and I think we have a link for this, is we have an upcoming webinar too. Like, we, again, as a sister center, we do a lot of the same sort of things. So we have a webinar coming up around this topic of combining resources, and it's actually built on this new brief that we just published and is in the link there. So we encourage folks to join us and follow what we're doing. Again, there's a lot of affinity between 21st Century and CCDF, and we're thrilled to be working with NTAC to coordinate that in the years ahead.
Thank you so much, Tony. The link to register for that upcoming webinar from NCASE is in the chat for you. And we hope that you'll join to learn more about this wonderful information. And I mean, I can't tell you how many bells that are ringing in my head because of my own personal experience with programs that utilize these kinds of funding resources. So thank you so much, Tony, for sharing all this information. It really was a wealth of knowledge, and we look forward to learning more from you.
Thanks.
Very educational. Thank you so much, Tony. So one of the biggest challenges of implementing strategic plans is making that ask, right? Whether that be a request to a funder or writing grants or talking to a community partner. As you consider the strategic partners that you're going to begin building a relationship with, start by conducting a comprehensive community assessment to identify organizations, businesses, and institutions that share similar missions and goals as you. And that support the specific elements of the grant that you're trying to sustain, which is key. Look for partners that are already engaged in youth development, education, health, or community welfare. Attend local networking events, community meetings, and conferences to meet representatives from potential partner organizations that you may not have known existed. You can also utilize online platforms like LinkedIn or community directories and local business listings to research organizations that could be a really good fit for your program. And once you've identified these potential partners, you want to approach them with a clear and compelling ask. You want to highlight the mutual benefits of a partnership, such as increased community impact, shared resources, and enhanced program visibility. You want to tailor your proposal to align with their goals and show how your collaboration can be mutually beneficial.
That's right, Chaz. So start small, small manageable projects just to begin building trust and demonstrate the value behind that partnership. For example, you could potentially hold a community event or collaborate on a specific initiative that benefits both organizations. Throughout the project, it is important to regularly seek the partner's input and involve them in the decision-making process. One way to do this is to establish an advisory board or committee that includes representatives from these groups to ensure diverse perspectives are considered. This inclusive approach not only strengthens your program, but also fosters a sense of ownership and commitment among your partners. By involving stakeholders in this way, you create a supportive network that is invested in the success of your program. This network is crucial for long-term sustainability of your 21st CCLC program.
That's right. So let's hear some more from Stacy about how Covington Partners does this. So, Stacy, what methods do you use to gather input and feedback from your stakeholders?
Yeah, you know what, I kind of want to, you've alluded to this, and I think both Nola and Tony kind of talked about this as well, but I want to just first start with who those stakeholders might be and then kind of take it from there, because you just were mentioning, different partners and maybe different types of donors or community partners who might come to the table. And I think that that's important for us to make a list of who all of those folks might be. And that does include not just the people who are giving you money or maybe who are doing some shared programming with you or shared expenses, but also thinking about your clientele, your staff, because I approach sustainability as from thinking that everybody knows everybody, everybody's talking to everyone. And, if one of our staff people, isn't happy with our programming or how we've done something, that gets back to people who are investing in our work. And so I just want to be very clear that when we think about stakeholders, we are thinking about a broad range of people who may be able to give that feedback to us. And when thinking about how we do this in Covington and with our organization, First thing that came to my mind, and I'm sure it does with a lot of people, is thinking about all of those formal ways that we do this, right? Like having a community gathering or having the advisory committee that you guys were just mentioning, thinking about surveys, whether those are, surveys that you can do online or meeting with focus groups, things of that nature. And I think we tend to think about those things first, but I also wanted to bring attention to all of those informal ways that you can get really good information and feedback from your stakeholders. I think about, we call them the meeting after the meetings. Like if I see somebody who I'm partnering with or an investor at a particular gathering or meeting, I'm grabbing them afterwards and just kind of doing a check-in with them, just to say, how are things going? Or, hey, did you hear about this that's happening within our programming? Finding all of those little informal ways, I think sometimes make a bigger impact than the formal feedback loops that we've established. And you have to have both, I think. You do want to be intentional about both of those things. But I tell you, I can get some good information from people when I just stick around a little bit or, run into somebody at the grocery store who I know, may have had some investment in our programming. I can just, kind of plug in a question here or there, and you can get some good information from those people who are invested in your program.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, those are also just great strategies to make sure that they stay involved and engaged with, the progress and achievements that your program is, achieving. So, can you tell us how you publicly acknowledge and show appreciation for your partners' contributions after, you take that feedback into account?
Yeah, I think that comes in a multiple ways also. We think about this in a tiered approach, that universal way that we're thanking everybody, whether it's through our social media channels. We do a monthly newsletter where we can, do a partner spotlight or investor spotlight, using the qualitative and the quantitative data that you were talking about at the very beginning, using both of those forms to show the impact of their work and then directly thanking the folks for their contribution to that. I think that is really important. If I'm doing presentations, we certainly put their logo on all of the things that we're presenting to the public. I think it's really important to know who's in the audience also. And so if I happen to see a partner or I see somebody who's contributed, I make a note of that and I publicly thank them in front of people. And talk about how those partnerships have created that impact that we're all looking for within our programs. I also think that, those are public ways that we can thank people. I also feel like personal touches go a long way. And we kind of forget about those things now. We think about these ways to do things on our social media pages, and certainly the branding recognition. But going an extra step for some folks and, writing those personal notes, while those aren't public acknowledgments, I think that they know that if you're taking the time to do those little things, you're also taking the time to recognize them where needed outside into the public.
Absolutely. Thank you. So much great information. Thank you so much for sharing, Stacey.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Don't go too far, though, because we're going to come back to each of our panelists for a little bit more in a few minutes. So, Chaz, what's next?
Well, now that we've discussed building strong community partnerships, let's move on to, oh, wait, nope, that's, sorry. We're coming up against time here, so we're just doing a little cutting. So we're going to talk about long-term sustainability for just a little bit. We want to talk about keeping your stakeholders engaged in the health and production of your 21st CCLC program. So you want to start by identifying all your relevant stakeholders, including your parents, your staff, and your community members, and your local business and policymakers. You also want to make sure you establish some clear channels for that kind of communication through newsletters or social media or even emails, like we were talking about with Stacey. When you empower stakeholders to become advocates for your program, by providing them with the necessary information, talking points, and success stories, they can help extend your network. So you want to consider hosting training sessions and informational meetings to equip them with the knowledge to advocate on your behalf.
Yeah, that's right. And so we want to make sure that we're maintaining transparency, right?
Absolutely.
This is important to help build trust by clearly communicating how we are utilizing these funds, the outcomes of the projects that are being funded, and the program's overall progress. Be open about your challenges and how you plan to address them. By effectively engaging your stakeholders, you can build a network of committed supporters who are invested in the long-term success of your program. This collaborative approach ensures a stable foundation for growth and sustainability, leveraging the strengths and resources of your entire community. Programs should also be sure to implement strong management and controls for the new funding sources that you've identified. By the end of your 21st CCLC grant, you're an expert at fiscal and data management for your program. And those same practices and strategies that you use to effectively manage your 21st CCLC program should be used to support these newly identified funding sources.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd like to just get some more input from our panelists on sustainability in the long term. So Nola, what strategies in Lincoln Community Learning Centers are you using to sustain your programming?
Well, I think you touched on a few things. The communication is huge. Like we need to be transparent, and we need to share as much about the impacts and the way that we're using the funds as we possibly can. So, with our 10 agency partners, we encourage our site coordinators to share their annual program highlights with the board of directors of the nonprofit where they work. We do an annual report. We also have quarterly stakeholder meetings. So those are all ways that we can, clearly communicate and share the information that we need to share in order to keep everybody at the table, to address concerns or, changing priorities. And continue to bring everybody along. This is not just my program that they are all a part of. This is our program, and they need to see their role as contributing partners in that process. So for us, it's about having a wide network that everybody is on the same page. They all know what the goals are. There's no hidden agendas here. We are all working toward one common goal by bringing all of our missions together.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy, who are some of your long-term partners, and how do you collaborate with them?
Yeah, so actually Covington Partners is celebrating 25 years this year.
Wow.
And so,
Yay.
I've actually been thinking a lot about this. Who are our long-term partners? We certainly started out thinking about the program partners. And I think that is so important in a sustainability plan, that we're not just thinking about who can give us money, but who can we share costs with? We BOGO with partners all the time. Like if you provide one art program at this school, can you provide it? We'll pay you for one if you can provide one for free at another, program site. And so we have a lot of long-term partners who have been able to do that with us. We have some folks who have been donors since day one. They saw the importance of the work with the population that we're working with, and they invested from the beginning, and we just kept them involved. And I think we built trust with them, and I think that is something you just mentioned. I'm very clear with what's happening that's going really well, and we're very clear with our partners and donors and investors of things that are not going so well. And I think that if you're always, particularly with the population that we're working with, if you're only sharing the good stuff, people are going to see right through that. That it's not always going to be just, good things that are happening. And so we share the data, whether it's good or bad, and those partners appreciated that. And I think that that's built long-term trust with them. So those donors, the partners, of course, we work with school districts. And so I noticed that somebody in the chat does the same thing, and that's their biggest partner are those school districts. Well, I tend to forget that is our biggest partner too. If we weren't able to do these programs within a school building, it would change our entire model. And so, those, of course, those school districts, Covington Independent Public Schools been with us since the beginning, and we're expanding out to those other folks. But, people will stick with you. They like the work. I think Tony mentioned this too. They like supporting children. We just have to build that long-term trust with them and bring them along and keeping them informed, like Nola had mentioned as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Stacy. So Tony, can you tell us, for programs that you've seen that use multiple funding streams, what record keeping and reporting requirements have come with sustainable funding sources? How can you make sure that programs have all that they need, have all the needed data?
Well, I think one of you mentioned it, that the first thing is the financial management. You have to be able to take a pot of funds and spend out of it in one direction and use another pot of funds in another direction. So you need to actually have an accounting system set up. And so if there's a kind of theme I would offer, it's how are you coordinating with the knowledge base in your community to enable you to do this? Besides the software you need to actually do the financial, do you have on your community board or some sort of volunteer an accountant who can look at it with you and make sure that it's set up right? And then I thought everything you shared about evaluation and assessment is huge, because you need to be able to show impact, but that's not usually the expertise of a program provider. That's something that they have to be trained in. So look to your local academic institutions, your colleges and universities, for evaluators, not to do the work for you, but to teach you the right methods and the right tools for doing it. And the key thing is, yes, there are federal requirements to funds that flow down to the states, but it's still the states that manage the reporting. So you really need to look very specifically at what your state agencies are requiring of you. And if you're having trouble, talk to your peers and talk to your state after-school network. And the network is so vital in keeping things rolling throughout the state. And we've found in our time as a center, the state after-school network's just a huge asset. So be sure you're working with them. And when you have a challenge, talk to one of your peers, because they've probably been through it before.
Such valuable information. Thank you so much. So it's been powerful to hear from Nola, Tony, and Stacy today. I know we're coming up against time, but I just really quickly wanted to go over a question that we had presented in the chat and open it up to our panelists here. So the question we have coming in is, what are your sustainability suggestions for programs from rural communities that have limited partners or businesses that they can engage with? I'll start. I think that you don't want to underestimate the power of engaging with the Department of Agriculture, which can help you in that situation. But also, local farms are a wonderful source of community partners. And there are a plethora of things that you can do when you're engaging with local farms. But I think that that's just one of many different things that we could do when we're engaging with community partners in rural communities. Do our panelists, anybody want to take a stab at it?
And I know that this isn't the preferred response for sustainability, but there are a lot of grants out there now that are specific to rural communities, or at least provide an opportunity to give you additional points for rural communities. And whether we like it or not, part of all of our sustainability plans is writing another grant. I mean, of course, we're blending and braiding all of these different funds, but grant writing is a part of that. And it was mentioned earlier, of course, in what the information that you guys were providing. And I think just being knowledgeable about all of those grants that are out there that now are prioritizing rural communities, I think is important.
Thanks,
I think
Stacy.
I would
I see that Dr. Candace Ferguson has jumped on with us again. It was so good to hear you talk about how this is connected to the needs that we've heard from the field. And I know that sustainability is close to the heart of NTAC. So do you have anything to add to this question?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this really takes me back to my days as a state coordinator in Texas. You know, we're a very large state, but we have so many rural populations, and it really didn't dawn on me until I got out and started seeing different locations and doing site visits. And, you know, our project directors would tell us all the time, you know, about their struggles in rural communities. But it's not until you really get out there and see, like, there may or may not be a gas station, or that may be the only resource that they have. And just being able to see that with your own eyes puts things into a different perspective. And so I want to give Nola the chance to talk, because I know she had some insight as well. But the only thing I would add here is going back to what you all talked about in the very beginning of really focusing in on which investments to sustain. Because I honestly, when you know that you're working with limited resources, especially in rural communities, you have to really think about what elements of this project can I sustain, because it may not be that you can sustain the whole entire 21st century program. So just, you know, drilling down and really looking at your data and the scope of your project, and really understanding what elements of that project do you really want to continue on and that you can feasibly do. And that's one thing that we will really dive into, as I mentioned, in these learning experiences throughout the year on sustainability, is helping rural programs and all programs really take a look at those elements and of their investments and how that accounts to sustainability.
Thank you so much, Candace. Nola?
Yeah, so I think I would add the After School Alliance has statewide networks that I know for us here in Nebraska, you know, have prioritized and have also been a huge advocate in connecting with funders that are interested in supporting particularly rural programs. And so for us in Nebraska, it's called Beyond School Bells. I don't know what it's called in the other states. Maybe there's a plethora of different names, but I mean, After School Alliance is a great supporter nationwide. And like I said, they have statewide networks. So that's a great place to start.
Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. And it looks like there are a number of resources that got shared in the chat too. So please feel free to engage with all of those. There's so many great community partners that have been listed here by, looks like Amanda Domino.
So, Tony, was there anything that you wanted to add to this question before we move on to more of our Q&A?
Well, I think folks have said it, although you know, and this is just me speaking as a fellow citizen, I saw somebody mention about being connected to our community representatives, our state and local leaders, and you know, getting both your organization and your families to advocate on behalf of out of school time is really, really important. You know, that we have to send that message so that it's clear that the need is there, and that, you know, that cuts across communities. And I'll bring a particular challenge that I don't have an easy answer to, but takes coordination and takes dialogue across communities, and that's transportation. It's so challenging for the field, as we've seen it, to have the transportation that allows young people to go from a school to a 4-H program or to a center. So looking at how you can coordinate that with peers is maybe one of the ways of sustaining the program.
You're right. Transportation is such a challenge, especially the you know, the further that we go out and the more rural that we get. But you know, I bet you there is a capital grant out there that will help you fund you know, a minivan or something that you might be able to find staffing and be able to offer that as a solution to those transportation needs. Hey, Dave, is there any other questions in the Q&A for us today?
Yes, one second while I'm browsing through here. I do have something that says, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in building sustainable 21st CCLC programs, and how are you addressing these challenges?
So we'll open that up to our panelists. Anybody want to kick us off?
I can just say, I think one of the things that's most challenging for folks is sometimes just giving it time. You know, sustainability has to start from the beginning. I was just kind of reflecting on some things that have worked well for us, and none of that happened quickly. You know, we had to, you have to be strategic, but also do it over and over and over again. You know, we had, we kept having legislators and stakeholders and decision makers keep visiting our program, and we were disappointed all the time by folks who kept saying no to us until somebody said yes. And so you just kind of feel like, you know, your efforts aren't being seen, they're not being valued, but it just takes one person to buy into it, and then it's kind of a domino effect. We've been doing this, as I said earlier, for 25 years, and we just now received state funding from our state budget. And it's just being persistent. And I think sometimes it is hard work. It's draining work. And just, I think sometimes the barriers are things that we don't necessarily control, other than that you just don't give up. You just keep doing it until that one person says yes. And then I do think it's a ripple effect. I don't know if that helps answer the question, but I think time is, I'm not a patient person, so it's a big barrier for me, at least.
No, I hear you on that. It's certain the fundraising game is a hustle, and you can't give up. That's the nature of the beast. And you know, 21st century funding is a great opportunity, but kind of like the ESSER funds that we're feeling right now, right? That there's a timestamp on that, and so building that sustainability plan from the beginning, from the application, moving forward is vital, and never give up on that hustle. Yeah. Do we have any more questions, Dave?
Yeah, I think I have one here that came in. Basically asking for what advice would you give to other programs looking to embrace innovative ideas and leverage local resources for sustainability, and where should they start?
So we'll open it up to our panelists, whoever would like to chime in.
I think my advice would be try everything. Like, explore every opportunity, ask lots of questions, share a lot of information, be passionate about the work that you're doing. People fund passion, right? So if you're excited about the work that you're doing and you share the positive impacts that and real examples of, you know, both quantitative and qualitative information, people get behind that. You know, we've approached funders that we know we're not necessarily, we don't totally fit in the box of their funding priorities. But when we come to them and say, when you're thinking, like I can give a really clear example. We had a funder who really focuses on like post-secondary programming. And so, you know, supporting post-secondary academic pursuit. And so when I was able to say, we can't get kids to post-secondary if we can't keep them in school. So here's why investing at this level will help them get to the post-secondary place that is a priority for you. They kind of went, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I get it. So, you know, like knowing what the priorities are and then tying your work to something that they are passionate about is another way I think that, you know, be persistent and like Stacy said, like, it's okay if you hear no a few times, but you know, if you keep pushing and you keep sharing, eventually you may get the yes.
And I'm just reflecting on NCASE actually, because I'm sure there's so many people that just don't know about the funding opportunities that come through that office through OCC or the CCDF. Tony, can you tell us a little bit about, like, how do we find out about these things and who do we talk to?
Uh, well, I think you have to be, like a good program leader is is one who is filled with inquiry and is always asking questions and exploring, because the players are changing. It's not uncommon for there to be new leadership at various agencies over time, and so always asking and finding out about. Again, that's why the statewide after school is such a great resource, because they are the ones that are kind of watching what's going on. But I think also in thinking about these last few questions is it's really telling your story and making the case for why what you do is so vital. And I can say, having worked in the field for many, many years, that that we tend to like compare ourselves to the school day or compare this out of school time experience to another. But again, they're all our children. And children fundamentally need the same things. They need enrichment, they need heroes, they need fun, and yeah, they need help with their homework. And your programs are a fantastic resource to the country, that makes this all possible and sustains these families. So the more you can make that case, both through the data you gather and through just your own telling of the story, the more value that has. And the one thing that I would offer is, remember that kids grow up really fast. And if you stay in this field, you're going to walk into a building and have an adult walk up to you and go, "Hey, do you remember me from the program?" And those stories are valuable too. Capture the stories of the young people that are now leaders in your community. The 21st century has been around for 25 years. So there's lots of adults who've benefited from this program and can make that case for why these programs are so very important to your communities and to our country overall.
Absolutely. It's so crucial when you're making those asks of all these different community partners to be able to effectively tell the story of the wins of your program and the impact that you're having on children in their community. It looks like we have one more question that came in. So the question's from Brian, and it looks like we're asking about how we remove the emotion from having to decide which programs might remain or be lost, especially if a program's meeting the needs of students at risk, but it may be costly or it has low attendance but high impact.
It's a tough one.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Removing emotion from the work that we do is always difficult, right? But that prioritizing what we're going to support and continue to support and what we don't is always a tricky task. Let's see. Do our panelists have any suggestions
I'm going
about
to say,
that?
I don't think you need to remove the emotion. It hurts.
Yeah.
Painful to lose an opportunity or to not being able to serve the whole community. But there's choices you have to make, and at the end of the day, it may be, who can you serve best with the resources that are at hand, and then how can you get others to provide support? The majority of children that are served in out of school time across this country, their parents pay for it because their parents can afford it, and that's fine. That's great. But we really need to focus on those children and families who don't have the resources and would otherwise be sent home alone or not have, any kind of care at all. So hard choice to make, but choose the caring one first and always.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is such a fruitful discussion and such a high interest topic. I mean, we could go on forever, right? But we do want to be sensitive to everybody's time. So I want to thank you all for the amazing input that you've given and all of the resources that you've shared. It's truly been an honor to have you.
And before we go, we want to take a moment to show you where you can get some of these resources. And so our producer, Dave Mazza, can you walk us through where are we going to find some of this stuff on the NTAC website?
Okay, 1 second. I was just going to go. I'm reloading that up here. Let's pop it on the screen. There we are. NTAC website. You can find all these resources. Just come out and look under our resources. And I know there was folks that had asked, where will we be able to get these? And give us some time. We will have all of these events that we do in the archived resources section. You can scroll down, you'll see about different webinars. In fact, you can go back and watch the previous live events like we did today. Go in and click on those and see them. But we will put these live events and the resources will be located right in there also. Too, we could also have other events that have been on. These are great events. If you have the time, sit down and watch them. They're great, and they give some great feedback all throughout these events. So check that out. These will be updated. There'll be more on here soon. So take your time to get in there. Also, too, I'd like to mention, connect with us. If you wanted to see what's new, what's happening, what's out there, connect up with us. Come over here, come on down and subscribe to the NTAC Messenger. Click on there, subscribe. Give me a thumbs up, everybody. Who's already subscribed to the NTAC Messenger? Let's see how many people out there actually have subscribed to it. Excellent. Look at these thumbs up coming, everyone. Very good. I'm glad to have it. Get that. It's a quarter. And also, too, you'll be able to come in and see some of our newsletters. If I scroll back up under news, you can always check out the blog and our newsletter so you can get those also. It's always great to have all that. So right now, I'm going to stop. I wanted to first mention that what great information has come out, Brittany and Chaz, and some of these resources shared from our audience is just absolutely. It's been great conversation going on back and forth.
Yeah, it really
So back to you
has.
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. And just so you know, sign up for the newsletter because that's how you're going to stay informed about our upcoming events, which we've got a calendar full for this fall of wonderful events to support you. And I'm thinking back to that question about rural communities. We have our next live, which is later this year, is going to be all about rural communities and 21st CCLC programs. So
That's right.
to stay informed and make sure you're connected and know what's on the docket coming up, sign up for that newsletter so you get the dates and the registration links for all of the content that we'll be doing. There's just been so much valuable information shared today. And I mean, we could go on for days about sustainability, but we heard Dr. Candace Ferguson mention about some upcoming resources that will be available around sustainability with the NTAC. That will also be shared in our newsletter. So if that is something that is close to your heart and you're hoping to learn more, sign up and stay informed. As we come to the end of today, though, we want to thank everyone on behalf of the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center, the NTAC. We are so grateful to our panelists, to Nola, to Stacy, to Tony. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wealth of information. As Dave Mazza mentioned, this recording will and the resources associated with will be available on our website. Give us the 10 business days, it'll be there. So if you're looking to save some of those links that were shared in the chat, don't worry, they'll be available whenever this is posted in our archives. I also want to take a moment and encourage you to complete the feedback form and share any ideas or topics you would like to see in future webinars. This topic is because of what we've heard from you in the field. It is because So many of you requested information and support around sustainability that this live webinar today was developed. So we take your feedback seriously. Take a moment to fill out that form. It doesn't take but a moment. We really take it to heart, and we appreciate your time for doing so. As you do that, if you want to stay informed, you can check out the screen here for our website, our email address, the QR code for the newsletter, but also check us out on social media. We're on X and LinkedIn. So, that was a lot of information today. As we close our session, again, a special thank you to you and our audience. Thank you, Chaz,
Thank you.
my co-host. Thank you to our guests. Really great programs, really great resources. Be sure to check out what they're doing and the work. Check out NCASE. There's so many resources I didn't know about. And thank you, everybody who joined us today, for your generous time. We hope you found today's session valuable. We hope to see you again soon too.
Thank you all, and enjoy your day.